Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Mom's Writers Club. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Sarah.
And today we are talking about Sarah's book. And it is called Johanna Porter is Not Sorry. And it is by Sara Reed, published author. And we are recording this a couple days after publication. So Sarah is still
I'm still
buzzing.
freaking out. Yeah.
So that's good though, because you're going to get to see all the excitement that Sara is feeling. So we are going to talk a little bit about her book and what inspired this book and part of the process too. So you will both be hearing about the book, but also learning something about her process that might help your process. So Sara.
Yes, Jessica.
How have the last couple of days been for you with your book publishing 48 hours ago?
Oh my God. They've been awesome. I mean, it has been awesome. It's just like, I almost just don't have words for it. It's the coolest thing. I don't know. So much has happened.
She's speechless.
I'm sort of speechless. I had an amazing release event at this bookstore in DC that I have literally been going to since I was like 7. And
what a magical experience that must be.
Totally magical. And there were all these old friends there and like some genuine people who I didn't even know came.
Isn't that a good feeling where you're like, hello, complete stranger who's interested in my book?
Totally. And one of them introduced herself to me, like specifically. She was like, I see that you know a lot of the people here, but I just want you to know that one total random stranger came to this just to come to it because it sounded cool. And I was like,
that is awesome.
Awesome. They sold out of books.
As they should.
My brother and sister were there. It was just amazing. And then just like all the love on social media is just completely just astounding. It's so cool. It's so cool. Like people are posting pictures of like their book arrives in the mail and they post a picture of it. They're like, guess what just came? It is so awesome. Super fun. Yeah.
I would also like to know more about what it was like to listen to your book for the first time.
Okay. So I was so eager to get the audiobook. I was like, why am I not getting the audiobook? Like, come on. What I didn't know is that the audiobook is produced by like a whole other corporate entity, like some totally almost unrelated, this thing that my editor has no control over and almost no contact with, it seems like. So I was like, oh, come on. And then on release day in the morning at like 7, I signed up for the free, because I don't have Audible. I signed up for the free trial and I started my book. And I listened to the entire thing over 2 days because we listened to it in the car on the way to DC and then back. And then I got home and I literally lay on my bed for 4 hours and finished it. And it was like hearing the story for the first time.
That is fantastic.
She was so good. This
Who is your narrator?
Her name is Marnie Penning.
Yeah.
Marnie Penning. She does lots and lots of audiobooks. She's an actress. And I mean, she was so good. Like she brought out the emotion and the intensity and in like ways I never could have imagined. I was like, that is some professional shit right there. Like I got to the end and I was like, oh, let me just hear that part again. Oh my God, the last paragraph. Oh, I just want to hear it again. I want to hear her say it again, and like after reading your book so many times, like once you have published your book, you have been through it a bazillion times. It is not fresh anymore. And I just like fell in love with it again. Like surfacing from this audiobook, I almost like felt really sad. I was like, oh, I'm never going to have that experience for the first time again. That was like,
yes, you are, because you're going to do the same thing with your second book. But I would just like to point out how courageous that is, because I've like listened to bits and pieces of my audiobook, but I don't want to listen to the whole thing. Like I don't want to have to like think about it. So I'm so impressed that you like listened to the whole thing and wanted to.
Mostly it was awesome. Mostly I was like, oh, I can't wait till she gets to this part. How is she going to do this part? It's going to be so cool. But there were a couple things where I was like, oh, fuck, I said that. Like,
That's what
like,
I do. I'm like, oh, I should have worded that differently.
oh my God. Like there is one gesture that stands out to me in the, I won't even say what it is, stands out to me in the audiobook where I was like, I used that one a little too many times. We hear the question a lot, like, how do you know when you're done? You are never fucking done.
Yeah, you're never done.
Like, I am literally listening to my professionally produced audiobook. It's really awesome. And I'm like, God, can I change that?
No, you may not.
Anyway, no, I may not. No, I may not.
Okay. So we've heard all about what your last couple of days have been like, but what is your book about?
My book, Johanna Porter Is Not Sorry, is about a woman, like a 40-something single mom, who steals a very expensive, very famous portrait of herself from the artist who painted it at this fancy gallery party. She goes and it's in the back, and she cuts it out of its frame and rolls it up and walks out of that party because 20 years before, that very artist sabotaged her career. He was her lover. She was his muse. He was her mentor. And in a fit of macho pique, he sabotaged her own like art career, which was taking off. And she's just been, and it just like wrecked her. And she's never been back to that person she was, and that fire she had. And so she sees this portrait of herself that he painted, and she is like, that does not belong to him. That belongs to me. And so she cuts it out of its frame, walks out of the party. And then she's like, oh my God, what have I done? And so she drives down to this little tiny house that her dad owns on the Chesapeake Bay. He like lives in Florida. He hasn't been there in years. Little shack. And she like holes up in this little house with this painting and sort of tries to figure out how to hide it and to do, and how not to go to jail, and how to deal with this famous artist's very sophisticated, glamorous, powerful daughter who is onto her. And she teaches herself how to paint again. Like she goes through the raw, gritty, creative process to like bring back and also rebirth herself as an artist. And she falls in love.
That's a great description. I really love this book. I got to read this book
several times.
Yeah, it was not your first book I read. It was your second, I think. But it was the first book where, I mean, the first time I read your other book was incredible too, but like this book just has so much magic to it. It's such a good book. I remember just being like, shocked at how beautifully written this book is and how incredible of a story it is. So I encourage you all to grab it. I will post a link below for you to order. Okay, Sara. So I would love to hear a little bit about how the idea for this evolved over time and how it changed over time, just briefly.
Oh, there's no brief answer to that question. So this was really the book that I learned to write on, not this version of it, but this character and this world. I mean, that's part of why it's so special to me, is like this, I learned to write with this character. Like she kind of taught me how to write. So she kind of came to me a whole in like 2015. This like train wreck of a woman who wanted to reclaim her artistic life, like a little autobiographical there. But so I wrote it again. I wrote 30,000 words. I started over. I wrote, like that. And then I finally like got to the end. I had a like beginning to end novel length version of this story. And it was really, really different than it is now. The painting wasn't in it. The Nestor Pinedo wasn't in it, like really different. And I queried it to agents, and what I got was, we love the voice, we love this character, we love the setting, but the story just isn't working. Like the story just is I don't get it. It's sort of flat. It's not opening up the way I want it to, so it got rejected. And I was lucky that I got a lot of the same feedback on those rejections. I got like 6 rejections with feedback, and it was all the same. So I was like, okay, I know what my problem is. So I shelved that book. I took a deep dive into story structure and kind of taught myself how to do that over the next year or so. Wrote another book, queried that book, did not get an agent with that. And then this book was just like, I was like, I am not done with this. I am not, like, it won't leave me alone. I have not done it justice, like often you think, I shouldn't just like keep working over the same book for years and years and years and years. Right. And that's generally true. But this was just like, I just have not done this woman justice. And so I started again. And
But one thing you did
here we
differently,
are.
you completely rewrite it? It's not like you kept messing with the same manuscript.
Yes.
You took all the lessons you learned along the way and completely rewrote the book.
Yes, I did. So same central characters, same story world, same theme, but totally different plot.
Yeah.
Much higher stakes. I took out this one storyline that, just wasn't working. I really honed in on making the stakes go with the theme and go with the personal growth, making the internal character arc and the external plot arc like really go together and be the same thing, Yeah. And I totally redid it. Like I said, the painting was not in the first version of the novel. This marvelous antagonist, Pilar Pinedo, was not in the first version of the novel. And I love her. I totally adore this
It's
bad
hard
guy.
to imagine the
She's
book
so great.
without those
Yeah.
things. So Sarah's book that comes out in another year, so like her book 2, I've read 2 versions of that book. Like I read the previous version that she has then rewritten, but I never read the previous version of this book, and I just can't imagine it without these like components, because that is just what like made it really, 2 of the components that just made it shine.
I sort of can't imagine it that way either anymore.
Okay, so I know that someday we're going to do a totally separate episode on this, but I want you to estimate how many words you wrote to get to this final copy. Just give us an estimate. 500,000.
All right, there's 80,000-ish words in this. First one was about 80,000 words. There were probably easily 100,000 words going into, probably 400,000 or 500,000 words.
I just want to put that out there because so many people, especially when they're early in their journey, they want to like get it right the first time. And the reality is the more experienced you become as an author, the more you realize that often you write so many more words than will ever go in your book. And I think that's just amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
yes,
that like really shows up in the story in this book, because this artist is relearning how to do this thing that she really has not done for 20 years. And she paints canvas upon canvas. She draws page upon page upon page. She balls them up and throws them in the water.
Can you talk about that, about creative practice? We've talked about it a lot as far as like how musicians and how artists do it.
Yeah. That's what I was.
Can you bring that full circle for us?
Yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking about next. So my husband is a saxophone player, professional saxophone player. And, he goes down every day and practices for an hour or two. And he plays all these notes that nobody hears. He's not on stage. He's not recording them. He is just playing these notes. And like it has to be done. And musicians understand that. I think performing artists understand this concept of practice in a way that we verbal artists maybe don't think of it. And I think we tend to think if we write a novel and we shelve it and it's maybe never going to see the light of day, that was wasted. Like we wasted all those words,
It can feel that way.
It can totally feel that way. It can be frustrating to shelve a whole project and it's hard, but you gotta write a novel to learn how to write a novel. And that's practice and none of it is wasted.
So another thing we've talked about regarding this is the concept of 10,000 hours.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about it because there's a song that The musician Macklemore sings about it, and it shows up on my Spotify all the time. But the basic idea is that you don't really fully become an expert, so to say, in something until you've practiced it for 10,000 hours. And to get to the point that you can write a publishable book, you're going to put those 10,000 hours in somewhere along the way. For some of us, that means the writing we did when we were in 5th grade, 7th grade, high school, college. And for some of us, when we're just getting started as adults, it means we're going to do it.
Going to spend a few years.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to learn to write. It takes a long time to write a novel, and it takes a long time to learn to write a novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 10,000 hours concept also shows up in Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers,
which was an interesting book.
Yeah, it was a really interesting book. I'm not sure, like there's some science, there's some like social science research around the 10,000 hours thing, but some people are like, a little debate it a little bit. I think it's maybe not quite 10,000 hours, because 10,000 hours is 40 hours a week for 5 years. It also depends what you're doing with those hours. Like, so I had this guitar teacher when I was 15, and he was like, yeah, some people are like, I've been playing guitar for 20 years, but they've been playing the same 5 chords for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like you have to be deliberately, and this shows up in the book too, you have to be deliberately trying to learn and pushing yourself. And there's this way I think about practicing, which is that like you like push yourself out to this point, and it's so hard and it's so hard, and you keep failing and you keep failing. You push yourself out to the point where you fail again and again and again until you don't fail. And then you push yourself a little further out.
I feel like we're talking about querying here.
Right? Kind of. Yeah. But like, I don't know, with writing, that's what it was. Like, I just kept trying. And once I felt like I got something, I was like, okay, now I need to get this other thing. It's just the arc is so long with novel writing. It's almost hard to see it.
Learn. Yeah. That, and like, so my 3rd book will publish in a couple months. I still feel like I am learning so much with every book. There are things where I'm like, it's kind of like you learn so much, and you create this product, and then you learn a little bit more things that you couldn't have understood the first time around. It's almost like rereading a craft book. You absorb so much the first time, and then once you're really comfortable with that, you can read that book again and find and understand things on a different level than you were capable of before. Like the first time I read a Donald Moss book, I was like, it's okay. But now that I'm more experienced, I read that and I pick up on things that they just went over my head before, Okay. Totally. So we talked a little bit about trying and failing. Can you give us a quick overview, because not everybody has watched all of our episodes, on what your querying to agent to publishing deal process, like just what that looks like, because not everybody knows, and I think it's a good story.
Where do you want me to start?
I want you to start querying this book.
Okay, querying this book. This was after I had queried 2 other books.
Yeah.
Over a couple 3 years. So I finished this book, and I actually had a good feeling about this book when I finished it. I was like, this one, like, I get it. This one feels more possible. So I started querying. I only sent out about 20 or 25 this time over a couple of months. And I got a call, and that was really fucking great. And I could go into super gory detail about how I like paced around my house, like completely, like I didn't even know what to do with myself, and how scared I was, and everything.
Well, you didn't seem that scared.
Like I was when I like took the call. I was like sitting there with my phone, my earbuds, and like 10 minutes ahead of time.
Did you have a phone call or a Zoom call?
Phone call.
Okay.
Yeah, phone call. No Zoom call. So I talked with this first agent. She was amazing. She told me all about how she loved my book and all this stuff. She had an issue with the ending. And I sort of got where she was coming from. And so she said, okay, let me think about this, and I will email you tomorrow.
Longest 24 hours of your life.
I was like, okay. And she did email me the next day, and it was an offer. And so I sent out my my letter to everyone I had queried. And I got a second request for call with another totally amazing agent. And I talked to her on the phone, and she talked to me about how much she loved my book and how great it was. And it's so gratifying. And that one, it was the same thing. She was like, okay, let me think about this, and I'll call you tomorrow. And that one turned into an offer too. Then, like 3 days before my deadline, Laura Bradford, chimes in like,
Spoiler alert.
like, oh my God, this sounds great. Will you send me the manuscript? And I was like, okay, here you go. And she must have read it in like, 24 hours or something like that. Yeah. I mean, or less, because she emailed me, I think the next day. She was like, oh my God, I love this. Like, is there still time to talk on the phone? I mean, now it's like Saturday and my deadline is Monday. And I was like, sure, let's talk tomorrow. And we got on the phone, and she talked to me about how much she loved my book. And I took notes, and it was like entranced, and stayed up half the night. And it was really great. And we just had, so after the first two agents, I was like, this is going to be a really hard decision. And after I talked to Laura, I was like, this is not a hard decision. Like, this is totally my agent right here. And she offered on the phone.
That's awesome.
She was like, I love this book, and, I want to represent you, and blah, blah, blah. And okay, so that was really great. Drank lots of champagne, and we did not edit it all that much. And I asked her on the phone, how close to submission ready do you think this is? And she said, I think it's pretty close. So she had a few things for me to do. It took me like a week. I sent it back, and she just like sent it out there, and this is one of the things I love about Laura. Like, she is no bullshit. She's like, something's ready, gone, done. What's next?
I love the part. Sara didn't realize her book was on sub.
It was really funny. Yeah. Like, she told me, she was like, I'm going to send it out in the middle of this coming week. I was like, okay. So I'm like waiting for the email from Laura about how she's put my book on sub. And I'm waiting, and I'm at work, and I get this email, and she's like, Algonquin passed. I'm not really surprised. It was sort of a long shot. And I was like, oh, so we're on sub. And she was like, oh God, I'm really sorry. Yeah, we're on sub. Yes, we're on sub. She sent me the pitch letter. She sent me the list of imprints she was sending it to. She was like, oh, sorry about that. I was like, okay. So yeah, the no's, and like, I'm working full time at this point as a nurse at a cancer infusion center, and I'm in there in my scrubs with my badge and stuff, and I'm like checking my phone like in the break room, and I'm getting like, so we got some rejections, and then she sent me this one email, which was like from this editor who was like, oh my God, like, you have such good taste. I am reading this. I am liking it. I will get back to you. And we were like, oh, yay. And so the other few more no's came in, and then this editor made an offer. And one thing I did not know is that, and did this happen to you, that you get a call with the editor?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh. And the editor basically like pitches herself to you. Like, that's what happened to me. Like, I was like, oh my God, she's going to ask me questions, and she's going to ask me what I'm writing next, and I'm really nervous, and I don't know how to pitch it. Blah, blah, blah. And that didn't happen. She just got on the phone and talked about how much she loved my book, and what a great imprint she was with, and all the great things about it, and all the advantages to going with this publisher, and blah blah blah, and then what she had in mind for the book. And she said right out on that call that she wanted me to add a bunch of backstory, probably another 5,000 or 6,000 words of backstory. And as long as I was okay with that, she was making an offer. She was like, yeah, this is going to be a 2-book offer. I'm going to call your agent. And I was like, I did not expect that phone call to include, this is going to be a 2-book offer, and I'm calling your agent. So I was just like dying. I had to go back to work. Like, I was in the quiet room at work, and I had to go back out and like
Pretend like everything was normal and fine.
And I felt like a hummingbird. I felt literally like everybody was moving in slow motion and everything was so quiet. And I was just like, oh, it was really crazy. And then we wound up going with this editor, Kat Klein at Graydon House, which is part of Harlequin, which is part of HarperCollins. And I could not have lucked on a better editor at all for this book and for probably me in general. So we added the backstory, and then we sort of went through, we didn't do a real big developmental edit. There were just some sections where she was like, we need to really bring this out, or we need to clarify what's happening here. She suggested a couple of tweaks to the end that I think are so key in wrapping up one of the storylines and in really, really nailing this really important storyline that I really wanted to get right. And now when I look at that part of the ending and know that like she suggested this thing that really made it work, I was just like, oh God.
Well, now I have to go in and reread the ending again.
Yeah. I'll tell you what it is in secret.
Okay. I would like to know how many fucks are in this book.
126, I think.
And how many are on the first page?
6.
I love that. So I love your cover, and I think you love it too. And I'm curious how much you got to, like, how many suggestions you got to give, if you got to give them ideas. Like, is this cover something they came up with, or kind of you came up with, or you came up together? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we consulted a lot on the cover and on the artist and on sort of like the flavor of the cover and kind of what we wanted it to convey. And, I definitely got to put in my 2 cents. And then it kind of went off and came back to me as this. And it was one of those marvelous moments where I was like, I never would have thought of this, but it's so good. It's such a great idea. So they offered me the opportunity to tweak things about that cover. This was interesting, actually. They offered me the opportunity to tweak things. They were like, do you want to, is this okay? Do you want to change anything? I suggested a change to like the smile, the kind of smile that she has. And then there were a few other things where I was like, well, can we change this? And can we change that? And it sort of like went dormant for a couple months. It just like wasn't what was happening in the process. And then we came back to it. My editor was like, okay, let's go back to this and let's see what was it that you wanted. And I looked at it again. I was like, you know what? It's totally great. Like, I sort of remember what I wanted, but it's fine. Like, we don't have to change stuff. And I think she was very relieved, but it was also interesting for me to notice, like, when you're really focused on something, you can lose perspective and you can think that really small things are really, really important. And maybe they are, maybe they're not, but like the benefit of some time passing and some perspective really changed the way I saw the cover. I came back to it and I was like, you don't really have to change anything. It's perfect.
Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah.
I remember when you first sent it, and beyond just loving the colors, I love green is my favorite color. So the fact it's largely kind of this green, it's just perfect. Okay. One of the things I love about Johanna Porter is that she is not 25 or even 30, that she is in her 40s. And I feel like that is an age that we do not often see in fiction. And I know that was a conscious decision on your part, but I would love to hear any thoughts you have on it or anything you want to add to that, if anything at all.
Yeah, totally. She's 43. And it goes back to that thing about, if you don't see the book you want to read, then you have to write it, Mm-hmm. And I was being interviewed by Jill Whitty, and she said, that's the same way that entrepreneurs think. They're like, there's a product missing in the market. Like, let me fill that hole. So that's what I really felt like when I was writing this book. I was like, I am not seeing the kind of book that I want to read. I was in my mid 40s when I wrote this book, and I was still feeling very vital and vibrant and energetic. And like I had a lot of life and potential. And I just wasn't seeing it.
Yeah.
So she really did come to me very clearly as a woman in her early 40s, that has lived a lot of life. I really also was drawn to that feeling for women, especially women who have had kids, but even women who haven't, this feeling that like you get into your 40s ish and you kind of like take a breath and look around you, and like life has just like piled on, and you've done a lot of stuff and you've accomplished a lot of stuff, and you've gone to school, or you've had your kids, or you've had a job, or all of the above. You've been married, you've been divorced, you've been moved, all the stuff. You kind of get to this place where you're like, what just happened and who am I now? you know
Yeah.
and and some of us get to that place and we're like, what happened to that thing that I cared so much about when I was younger?
Yeah.
And I was just really drawn to that kind of that
Yeah.
point in life.
And you bring that out really beautifully through this book with Johanna.
Thank
Everybody should read it. I don't know if I've said that yet. Okay, so talking about like this thing that matters so much. We are obviously writers here on Moms Writers Club, but I would like to hear you talk a little bit about the idea of creative work versus a hobby. I think a lot
you.
of us have and potentially still are experiencing this. There are definitely times my husband has referred to writing as a hobby, although now that I'm getting paid, he has stopped doing that. But it'd be nice if
Yeah.
it could happen before that. But I would like to I think some people, like when you first said creative work is work, so this is like years ago at this point that you said this, and I was like, but I love it, because in my head, work could not equate with something you love doing, right? And I think that's kind of because we live in the United States where like work, work, work. But I see it very differently now, partially and thanks to you. Can you talk about that?
I can. I have so many thoughts. And one of them
Yes.
is that I think a lot of creative people feel like you.
Yeah.
I did, where it's like, well, I don't really want to call it my job or work because like I love it so much.
Yeah.
And I actually think there are people who do, other kinds of work who really love their jobs and who are super engaged and really into it. And I think maybe for creatives, the disconnect is that we really need to be doing creative work and we sort of feel wrong doing
Yeah.
anything else.
I
So,
think part of it is also that it starts as a hobby, right? I was working as a nurse,
right.
but writing for
Mhm.
fun and because it was something I enjoyed and loved and wanted to do something with. So I couldn't see that as work in the same way I could see working as a nurse was work. And at
Right.
some point it flipped, and now I'm like, yep, I'm working. Leave me alone. But
Right.
and I'm writing, and I
Mhm.
consider that work. But
Yeah. Creative work is real work. Let me say it again. Creative work is real work. Yeah. Okay. So in the book, Johanna contends with this idea that creative work is that painting and art is like preschool playtime. And she contends with it with this hot surgeon who lives up the street, who has kind of his own issues. And he's one of these guys who's like, worked 60 hours a week for the last 30 years, and like gone to a job and had lots of prestige and lots of power and importance. And he's chief surgery and he's like got all the stuff. And here's Johanna Porter, like train wreck in her little shack of the house trying to paint. And she's like, looks him in the face and she's like, I have to work. And he's like, what do you mean you have to work? And she's like, what do you mean? What do I mean? So that was my moment of like getting to really put that forward, that like what she's doing is real work.
yeah,
And
it's so subtly but strongly done in this book. I love it. Maybe it's not so subtle actually, but whatever. I love it.
yeah, that it takes time, it takes hours, it takes focus, it takes energy for those of us for whom it's not a hobby, it is not a hobby. It's fun. We love it, but it's work.
It is interesting I don't know exactly when it was, but there was a point at which it switched in my head, and I love it, and it is work, and that it's okay to love the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
But it took a while to get there.
Yeah. It's helpful for me to think of it that way. It may not be helpful for everybody to think of it that way.
It's helpful for me to protect my time. Like
yeah.
when I wake up at 5:30 and my husband's downstairs and he's like, "Hey, want to hang out and have coffee?" And it's like, "I love you. We can do that later, but this is my work time, and I have to be working during my work time." To think of it like that instead of, "Oh, well, I'll just write a chapter when I have time," is really helpful, because a hobby is something that you don't take as seriously. At least for me.
Right. Like a hobby is something that falls in a really different place in the priority list, you know?
What is your favorite thing about this book? You can name more than one. I don't care. Give us your top 3.
Okay. Well, having just listened to the audiobook, I love the intensity of emotion in this book. I love how intense this character is and how big her feelings are. And I love having that on the page. And it goes hand in hand with her voice. I really love the voice in this book. And she's very sweary, a little snarky, and a little prickly. And I've had a few reviewers now be like, well, I wasn't sure I really could groove with her at first. But, then then you sort of get in there and you're like, this is what you're all about. And it was so fun to think about painting a lot with this book. I love visual arts. I love going to museums and looking at paintings. I love how they move me and make me feel. My daughter-in-law is a professional, successful painter, May Reed, Maeread. Look her up.
Yeah, she's amazing.
So good. So I've actually watched her. I think it was when she was around 30. She came back to painting after having done a bunch of entrepreneurial startup kind of work, web design. She was really beat down, and she just came back to it because she was like, this is where I'm happy. And I really watched her resurrect her considerable skill as an artist and kind of find herself in her art. And it was just really fun writing about that and thinking about art and thinking about how artists are different and writers are the same way. You can have two who are really great and who are really different, and it was kind of fun thinking about the competitive nature of creative work sometimes. What's your favorite part of this book?
My favorite part of this book, let me think for a second. So it has admittedly been a while since I've read this book, but I need to think through a couple different spots. I love the getting ready to go to the gala or whatever it is scene. So there at the beginning of the book, there's a scene where Johanna is like, first she debates whether or not she's going to go to this dumb rich people thing. And then she has to go get a dress, and she goes with her daughter. And I love the relationship she has with her daughter.
I love that too.
But I also love their dialogue. Their dialogue is just the whole thing is just awesome. It just makes me happy every time I read any scene with the two of them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes even without words, even without dialogue, you can feel the connection between them. And I feel like I have that with my daughter, and it was just really fun.
Yeah.
See that. But I also love the where she steals the painting, that whole scene, and going out to the car. Yeah. I mean, what the fuck did I just do? And anyway, I won't say any more about it. I don't want to spoil anything, although I think that's clearly in the book. Those would be my favorite parts.
Yeah, I really loved writing about motherhood in this book. Mel sort of played
Mel is her daughter.
Mel is her daughter, who's 17, and she's a phenomenal soccer player. She's been recruited to this college. She's in her senior year of high school. And they're very close. And having Mel and raising Mel was it filled this very complex, hole in Johanna's life in a way, that was incredibly redeeming and like just saved her life in a lot of ways. But it's also like complex and involved with loss, and it's just, but they come out of it with this really cool relationship. And one of the things that one of the other agents that I talked to on the call said that I absolutely loved was that she was like, this is a book about a mother that is not a book about motherhood. And I love
I
that.
appreciate that. There's
And
so many books about motherhood.
And they're great. But we are mothers and we are many other things,
Yeah.
So that was really gratifying.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I feel like so often women are boiled down to certain roles they serve. And in reality, we have so much more going on. And it's nice to see that something can be there without being the whole point of it.
Yeah.
The whole point of that person is not just that she's a mother.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. So I would like to know, this book just came out a couple days ago, so maybe we're getting like way ahead of ourselves. But I'd like to know what is next for you and where you are currently at in your process and where your head is at. Obviously, your head is probably still on publication day, but whatever you'd like to share about where you are now and what comes next.
Yeah. I mean, the entire last week and a half, I've just been so like, like I haven't been able to like settle down and work on my actual work in progress. So I have a book 2 coming after this one in early 2024. So probably like January, February of 2024. And it is done. And with my editor, that is the long arc of publishing. And we're going to go through developmental edits and the whole thing over the summer. But they're already thinking about title and cover. We haven't even edited
Wild
it yet.
and fun.
Yeah, so that's fun. And I am working on book 3, which is, I'm working on book 3. And, and it's really fucking hard. I'm in the beginning, and I've been in the beginning with this book for like 8 months, I think. I've been starting this book for like the last 8 months.
Yeah, but your process is a lot different with this book, you'll get there.
Yeah. And I know that once I really get a foundation under me, then it's like the first third of the book takes 60% of the time for me, probably in the first draft,
Yeah.
And then I get into revision and editing, which is my happy place. And so we'll get there soon.
So far as the 3 books you have worked on and are working on, what has been which one has been the hardest?
The one I'm working on now.
Yeah.
Although it's hard to say because obviously I wrote this book like 3 times,
Yeah.
I changed it around so much. I wrote it, then I rewrote the whole second half of it, then I shelved it, then I wrote it again. So that was hard. Book 2 was not all that different. I wrote it and then I shelved it and I wrote it again. All books are hard.
Okay.
They're great.
So
I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, but it is really fucking hard.
It is hard. I think we're going to wrap up here.
Okay.
But feel free to comment below if you have any questions for Sara about her book. Again, it is Johanna Porter is Not Sorry. You can get it at any local bookstore. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can order it on Amazon.
You can also get personalized signed copies through Bluebird Bookstop, and we will link to them below.
All right. Well, I think that's everything.
And the audiobook is fantastic. If you're into audiobooks, please listen to this one, if only to hear this woman speak. It's like so good.
Sara, where can people find you online?
I am at sarareed.net and at Sara Reed Author on Twitter and Instagram.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you next time.